Good evening. I'm Sister Catherine Bryan. I'm privileged to serve as the Executive Director of Maryville Academy. Welcome to another program of Children First, brought to you and enabling us to come to you through our friends at Chicago Access Network. And I am delighted that our guest this evening is Tisa Morris. Welcome, Tisa.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're about to hear about Tisa's amazing service and history of coming to this service with children. I want to begin by inviting Tisa to tell us where she's from. Where are you born?
I was born in Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, grew up on the far south side of Chicago.
So Tisa's a native Chicagoan,
Yes.
and you're a lawyer, isn't that right?
I've been a lawyer since 1991, graduating from DePaul College of Law.
All right, a great university here in our city of Chicago. Can you tell us what caused you to study law?
Honestly, when I was growing up, I used to watch, back then, there were a couple of law shows on television, and I was always inspired by the sorts of things that they did, and actually, on a shallow note, the things that they wore. I like the clothes that they wore. It was just exciting to be able to make a difference with the power of words and with the power of the law. I found that fascinating.
And when you graduated from law school, how did you begin your career?
I actually started out as a clerk in the child support division of the office. Back then they
which
had
office?
I'm sorry, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
Okay, but I
That's
want to
right.
get to the point that she's serving today in quite a leadership position there, but good, all right. So you started 20 years ago.
I started 20 years ago researching. Back then it was a kind of a special unit that did extraordinary relief for serial child support offenders. At the time there was a dentist who made quite a bit of money, but he owed about $50,000 in back support.
Really?
So we would do things like citations to discover assets. We would have investigators go out and follow them. It was kind of cloak and dagger sort of stuff. It was really great.
Just because he wouldn't contribute to the care of his children.
He wouldn't contribute to the care of his children. We had a wonderful investigator who I actually keep in contact with now. His name was Morton Paradise. And it ended up that this dentist moved to Michigan.
Really?
To avoid paying child support. And every court appearance, our investigator would go and talk to the kids who were at the time were in their 20s. And he said, "Why do you follow up on this?" And he said, "Just because I want to know why he just abandoned us." So that kind of sparked my interest in children.
And ever since. So when you finished your time in the child support department or unit actually of the State Attorney's Office, where did you move next?
I actually have been in just about every division of the office. When I left child support, I went to appeals for a month. Didn't like appeals. It was kind of a dry atmosphere. From that, I went to traffic court. From traffic court, I went to First Municipal, did domestic violence. From there, I went to the 6th District, which is in Markham, and then came back to 26th Street. From 26th Street, I went to preliminary hearings, left the office for a while to go to the Office of Professional Standards, came back and worked in the gang cold case murder unit, and then eventually ended up where I am now with the Juvenile Justice Department.
And now you are the bureau chief for the Juvenile Justice Bureau, right?
Yes.
Of the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
The Cook County State's Attorney's Office, yes.
Now, before we get into that, which is our main topic tonight, and I know that you've got a lot to share with us, you took a trip over to the Chicago Police Department and worked in the Office of Professional Standards.
Yes, I started with the Office of Professional Standards in July of 2004 and stayed there until 2007.
And I think what our viewers might like to know, Tisa, the service in the Office of Professional Standards and, of course, the service you have right now, you're a public servant in these roles. So our viewers, you were working for them when you were in the Office of Professional Standards. How were you their public servant in that role?
The Office of Professional Standards, I think, well, it no longer is now. It's now IPRA, the Independent Police Review Board. Really served as an aspect at the time of the police department of information and investigation of police misconduct. They investigated, they being OPS at the time, anytime a person was injured in police custody, if there was a domestic violence incident, and if there was a shooting or a mysterious death in custody. We did a lot of outreach to the community to let them know that there was an alternative to walking into a police station and reporting to an officer, that they could come to us and tell us what happened and that we would investigate it.
And now you're in the Cook County State Attorney's Office again,
Yes.
Serving as the bureau chief. How in that role are you serving as a public servant? You're working for our viewers and for me and for the rest of us?
Yes. I think that's something that a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, a majority of the public don't understand, that the State's Attorney's Office represents everyone. Although historically we're known as prosecutors, every time we enter a courtroom we represent not only the defendant but the victim and everyone who is present at that moment. We do a lot of outreach. We have an outreach unit in the Juvenile Justice Bureau. Our young assistants as well as our supervisors, myself, do is whatever we can to inform the community about the services that we offer, both child protection and the delinquency side, protecting the rights of our young people.
And our Juvenile Justice Bureau, the Cook County State Attorney's Office, is centered at the Juvenile Court in Chicago. Is that right?
The center office is at 1100 South Hamilton. We do have branch courts in Markham. We do have a branch court that actually operates out of 1100 South Hamilton, but it represents incidents that happen in the 5th District, the 4th District, the 3rd District, and the 2nd District. But the main office is, yes, in Hamilton. And there's also Markham, the Markham Courthouse, which historically had been a very heavy court call, but it is alleviated a little bit.
So our viewers may be familiar with the court system of Cook County or may not, and I think what you've just been explaining is that the court system serves the city of Chicago and about 100 surrounding suburbs, which are the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th districts
Yes.
that you've just been describing. And so you are responsible for the cases in juvenile court for all of Cook County. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. When you put it that way, it sounds rather weighty.
Well, it
But
is.
yes.
It's an awesome responsibility.
It is
and
an awesome responsibility.
It's encouraging to know that you are the person in this role because you're bringing your values and your experience to it, and you've just described some of that experience. Let me just take one other question here before we get into the actual work you're doing.
Okay.
You have some experience as a mom yourself.
Yes.
Would you want to tell us about your son?
I have a son who actually used to go to law school with me when I first started out as a young single parent. Didn't have anybody to watch him, so I used to take him to class. And I remember one time at class, we had an instructor, Professor Kiley, Terrence Kiley, who was a great professor who taught us torts, and he had a very strong proponent of the Socratic method. So he would scan the room and he would ask everyone for questions. My son was sitting next to me, and he was 5 at the time. And Professor Kiley was doing his thing, and all of a sudden, my son Jay, he dives under the table. I'm like, "What are you doing? Why are you under the table?" And he said, "I didn't know the answer to the question." So he's always been there as a support system.
And what's he doing now?
Now he is graduating in June from getting his MBA at University of Chicago.
That's terrific.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mom. And also, I think shows that you had some experience raising a child and have some appreciation for the families who are coming into juvenile court.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about what you are responsible for at juvenile court. Now, first of all, the size of your office. How many attorneys do you have?
Currently, we have approximately 84 attorneys, along with the support staff, a total staff of approximately 100.
Okay, and you are handling what kinds of courtrooms?
We have 2 different kinds of courtrooms in the Juvenile Justice Bureau. We have what's called the Child Protection Courtroom and the Delinquency Courtroom. The Child Protection Courtroom is the type of courtroom that handles cases where a child has been abused, neglected, or abandoned. In that courtroom, we operate under the law of civil procedure. In the case of a child being beaten up or mistreated, there's an investigation by the police department along with the Department of Children and Family Services. Eventually, if they deem it necessary, they bring it to our office. It's screened by one of our assistant state's attorneys. based on their screening, the review of the evidence, speaking with the medical practitioners, if there's a determination made that there's enough evidence to proceed, we file a petition in court and it proceeds that way. Excuse me. The delinquency portion of it.
Let me keep you with the child protection for just a moment, if I
Sure.
can. We've just had in the news in the Cook County a sad story of a child who died, and it's alleged died at the hands of his parents. Now, in a case, I can't speak about that case, but in a case in which a child is injured or dies from the injuries, is it the case of that child that comes to your court?
If the child has died from the injuries, we would not get that case per se. It would go over, depending on the age of the alleged defendant, it would probably go to the adult system. However, in the case where a child has died, if there are surviving siblings that are under the age of 17, we would get that portion of the case, the siblings, the surviving siblings. If it is a case where, unfortunately, a child has been injured, a child has survived, we would get that case, if it's deemed to be proper for us to have it.
And that's why you call them child protection cases.
Yes.
You're taking care of the living children so that they don't become injured again.
Yes.
And what kinds of cases do you see?
Oh, gosh. Horrible cases where children are injured, children are abandoned. We get cases where children are just left on the street because, for whatever reason, the parents or caretakers feel overwhelmed, either by mental illness, by drugs, by a number of different things. We have cases where children are not being given the proper medical attention that they may need. There are just a variety of situations that bring those cases into our courtrooms.
And so do the parents come to court also?
Sometimes it is actually a great outcome if the parents do come to court, because that gives us all hope that they are there, that they recognize that there's a problem, and that there's hope that they are there to support and rectify the situation that brought them into the system in the first place.
Oh, so there's lots to be done. I see that we have a caller, and he's left a question. So Tisa, if I may, I just will take care of the caller's question here. But I want to continue with what you're talking about here.
Thank you.
His question is a little different. He called to ask how long Maryville's been in existence, and we're very blessed to say that Maryville has been in existence since 1883, founded by the Archdiocese of Chicago to serve children of all faiths who were left homeless by the Chicago fire, the epidemics that followed, and since 1883 by the other kinds of challenges to their living in safe homes or otherwise needing care that can't be provided at home. And the caller's other question is if Maryville has plans to expand in more areas in the city, and the answer is yes. So, saying that, I want to come back to Tisa, who's talking about the very children who are sometimes living in our Maryville homes in Chicago and in other parts of Cook County. And Tisa, when you talk about the parents coming to court, what exactly happens in the courtrooms? What do you do or your staff do, and what do the other persons in the courtroom do?
What our staff does, the prosecutors in the courtroom are assistant state's attorneys. Under the law, the only person that can prosecute a petition is one of the assistant state's attorneys. There's a judge. There is an attorney for the minor. The guardian ad litem generally is what they are. Sometimes there's a private attorney for the minor, not necessarily the guardian ad litem. There is the public defender. There are caseworkers. Depending on the situation, there may be mental health experts, the clerk, the sheriff. I'm sure I'm leaving out somebody, but there are a number of different people that are in the courtroom. When the case first comes into the system, there's a hearing to determine whether or not there's probable cause to proceed with the case, whether or not there should be temporary custody taken of the children, whether or not the children should remain in the home with a safety plan, or they should remain in the home under some sort of court supervision. And it proceeds through the system through first the probable cause hearing, then into different phases, the adjudication, the permanency planning. A number of different people are involved in all of the stages of it.
So 3 children come into the courtroom. In your case, there may be 3, 4, and 5. They're they're in court because they've been, maybe their parents have had problems with drugs. That's a common
Yes,
problem, isn't it?
unfortunately it is.
And for whatever reason, when the parents became involved with drug abuse, they put themselves in a position where they're not able to care for the children every day.
Mm-hmm.
What is likely to happen for these 3 children?
Well, the first thing that will happen, and I should back up a little bit, in child protection cases, what the law is we operate with what's best for the children, the best interest of the child. In a case where there is that are children that are there, unfortunately, because of something like drug abuse, there's an assessment done to determine what the nature of the drug abuse is. Services are put in place to help the parents, or the parents are there. If the parents are not there, there are notices that are sent out to bring the parents into court. And there's a determination made whether or not the kids can stay in the home, whether there's appropriate, safe, and reasonable environment for the kids to stay in, be it a relative, a family friend. But the first step is assessing to see what the extent of the problem is and what services can be put in place for both the children and the family.
So some of the children are able to stay in their family home along with some kinds of treatment and other intervention?
Yes.
And then some of the children aren't able to stay in the family home and they go to a different place?
It depends on the extent of the abuse, the drug abuse. If there are parents that come to the court, like you suggested, and participate in the services that are in place, oftentimes there will be what's called a safety plan.
Mm-hmm.
They will be allowed to remain in the home. There'll still be intervention and supervision by the caseworkers if appropriate, but they, under some circumstances, are allowed to stay in the home.
And that therefore those families can be kept together while the children are protected.
Yes.
And then in some of the cases where the children can't stay in the home, where do they go?
It really depends. Oftentimes there are grandparents. There's a lot of grandparents that are raising their grandchildren. If there's another family member, if the parents are not living together, if it's the father that's having the problem with the drugs, we'll see if we can place the children with the mom. On the other hand, if it's the mom that's having the problem, then they'll go to the father, aunts, uncles. In the situation where there is no one to take the children and they can't remain in the home, then DCFS will be appointed their temporary guardian, and they will be in the custody of DCFS.
And then you receive regular progress reports on how the children are doing if they're not in their parents' home, right?
Yes.
So that we never lose track of the children. We've heard some horror stories in the past about children being lost in foster care, but in your processes at juvenile court here in Cook County, you receive regular reports on the children, don't you?
There are regular reports under the law from the time that if temporary custody is taken, there has to be a permanency planning hearing within a year of that initial custody, but naturally it happens generally every couple of months, depending on the nature of what brought it into the system. It could even be more frequent than that.
Now I'm going to ask you as a parent, having seen the child protection challenges for the parents, do you have any advice for our parents tonight who might be watching? Things that they should watch out for, be careful for, be attentive to, so that their children are well cared for?
You know, when I was a young parent, I used to get about 4 hours of sleep a night, and there would be very rough times. And I think that parents should not be afraid to take care of themselves first. To leave your child with somebody that you trust, whether they're going to be safe, and to take some time for yourself, and to just take a moment and appreciate the fact that if you take care of yourself and be better for yourself, that you're going to be a better parent, and that our children need that, and we need that as well.
Tisa, since you said that, I'm going to just mention one program Maryville has that might help parents.
Okay.
Maryville provides a crisis nursery for parents who have children from birth up to age 6. It's on the northwest side of Chicago, but it's open to anyone, not necessarily in that area, but anyone in Cook County or actually neighboring counties. If they need a safe place for their children to be ages up to 6, They need a safe place for a few days and nights while they're dealing with exactly what you described, or if they're dealing with a crisis, domestic violence, maybe eviction, loss of a job,
Wow.
health issues. So thank you for mentioning that. I hope you don't mind my adding that.
No,
The
I think that's a wonderful program.
we want you to know that Maryville has this resource, and please listen to what Tisa said. And if it's that challenging a situation for you, please know that if you don't have some family members or friends you can go to, Maryville is here for you. Now, Tisa, I'm going to ask you about, generally, they're older children who come into the delinquency side, right?
Okay.
The other side of, or the other half of what juvenile court deals with, protecting children who've been abused or neglected, and dealing with children who've brought some kind of harm to another person,
Yes.
right? So would you tell us about the juvenile delinquency side?
The juvenile delinquency side is the side that I think the most familiar analogy for people would be prosecution, 26th in California, that sort of thing. The only difference between the prosecution of juvenile and adult offenders, other than the services and the way things are handled, is the sentencing option for juveniles. In 2010, the law changed, and formerly kids that were 17 charged with a misdemeanor would be prosecuted as adults in adult court. On January 1 of 2010, that law changed, so now they come to juvenile court. But what we do in the juvenile delinquency side of it is prosecute crimes where they're victims, whether people have been hurt or robbed or victimized in some way. The law is different, as in child protection, it's civil procedure. In the delinquency side, it's criminal procedure.
And your attorneys are presenting these cases as well, just like the
Yes.
child protection, not just like the child protection cases, but just because as you handle the cases in child protection, you also present the cases in juvenile delinquency.
Yes.
Wow, it's a lot of responsibility. And so, your attorneys, what kinds of cases are they dealing with most of the time?
Anything from murders, sexual assaults, batteries, heinous batteries. We had a horrible case a couple of weeks ago where this 12-year-old unfortunately thought it was a good idea to pour lighter fluid on his friend and set him on fire. So there are very sad cases that come into our courtrooms, but anything that would be a felony for an adult is prosecuted under the Juvenile Justice Bureau.
Really? I think we have a caller, so let's listen to the caller.
Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
you're on the air.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine, thank you for calling.
I was just wondering, I was in some of a case like that because my girlfriend abused my daughter. But during that time, all that, we had moved, and we supposed to went to court and everything, but we never got a chance because the attorney said they were going to get back into with us, but we were so much under stress that we had to move because we lost our apartment. And I was wondering how long or what limitations I can do to prosecute her, or how many years.
How long ago was it that you were in, that the case was in court?
It was 2 years ago.
Were you in court in Cook County, sir?
We was in Cook County Court, yes.
Did you ever go to a courtroom?
We went to the courtroom, and then we went there, and they said, they was going to have a day for us to come for a trial. But during that time, we was going through so much stress and stuff that we had moved.
Mm-hmm. I think. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
But I was wondering, since we didn't never get any information about how the court to come back about the case, is there a limitation of anything that I could still prosecute her for what she had done to my daughter?
Were you given an attorney when you came to court, sir?
No, we had public stuff. The state took it over.
Was your girlfriend appointed an attorney?
She had an attorney, yes.
Okay. What I would suggest to you, sir, is tomorrow morning, why don't you give us a call? Our office, our phone number is 425-7000, and you can give us that information. I can't take it over the air because, of course, it's confidential, and we respect your privacy and the privacy of your daughter. So if you do that, we'll look up your information tomorrow, and we can give you some more specific information about what's going on, if anything, with your case.
Yes.
Were you able to get that phone number, sir? Oh, so Tisa, thank you for helping the gentleman and making yourself available tomorrow to get him the information he needs. And clearly, it's very important. These are our children who are our future. You've talked about protecting children who are placed at harm's way. You've talked about helping children and holding them accountable within the juvenile delinquency area. Now, we just have a short time left, so I would ask you if you want to just say maybe one more message to parents now, parents of children who may be drawn to work with, go down the wrong path. What advice might you give to those parents?
My advice would be, don't be afraid to intervene in your children's lives. Don't be afraid of your children. When I was growing up, I had a healthy fear of both my mother and father. And I think that kept me on the road to straight and narrow. So I'm not saying abuse your children. Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But they need to know that you're in control of their lives. Children respect that. They want that, and they flourish when someone's in control. So then they can just be kids.
Well, thank you, Tisa, for being with us this evening. This is very helpful. I think juvenile court's a very important place for our children and our families. It's reassuring to know that Tisa Morris and her staff are in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office at Juvenile Court, helping us look after our children, those who've been victimized, those who've gone down the wrong path and perhaps hurt someone else. So we thank you, Tisa, for being here. We thank you for the good work you do. And we thank you all for being present with us this evening.